Welcome. You are listening to Guiding Stars and the Jeffrey Wolfe Green School of Evolutionary Astrology. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. I'm joined here by my colleague, Stacie Pazura, and a panel of evolutionary astrology experts as we explore the natural expression of the archetype of Virgo and the sixth house. Here's our panel today. We have Deva Green, Patricia Walsh, Moshe Wolfe, Rose Marcus, and Bradley Naragon. Welcome all of you. Look at you. So excited. And all of you were at the last School of Evolutionary Astrology event we had up in Oregon. And so that was, I don't even know how many years ago that was, several years ago. So
Oregon or South Dakota?
7 years ago. There's one in Oregon and Still Meadows. I think you guys were all there. Stacie, you might not have been there.
Yeah, I don't think I was there yet.
But each one of our speakers is going to take on 2 planets in the sign of Virgo and explain and express how that, how you can expect to experience it and how to understand it more deeply from an evolutionary perspective and a natural point of view. So I'm very excited about this session. We've gone all the way from Aries to now Virgo today. And Virgo is considered to be a transitional archetype as we leave the sign of Leo and move toward Libra. With Leo, in particular Pluto in the 5th house, the soul is learning how to identify the creative principle and life purpose from within themselves. In order to do so, they necessarily had to emotionally immerse themselves in that focus, which led to the creation of the pyramid effect, where they are at the top of that pyramid and expecting all factors in their life to revolve around their needs. I'd like to see that next slide if I could. Here's your pyramid with the one on the left, of course, it reflects the Leo archetype with Leo at the top of that pyramid. Now, the pyramid will invert with Virgo here, where the focus becomes being of service to the whole and doing your part to improve the way you found this world and to improve yourself also as a result. The soul is at the bottom in order to serve the needs of the whole through the work function. And the soul is learning practical methods and techniques and skills in order to apply their work-related function to the tribe or to society. The soul is learning to pierce that balloon of self-inflated specialness and the feeling of being so important and learning necessary evolutionary lessons of humility and purification. They are learning to understand all that they are not. Obviously, as we then move up to Libra, the soul is learning to be an equal in society in some way. Now, from Aries to Virgo, or Aries to Leo in particular, it's more of a subjective focus where the ego is very involved in self-discovery, securing itself, expressing itself. And from Libra to Pisces, we have more of an objective focus where you're learning how to participate in the whole and ultimately in the universe in terms of what you bring to the world. So it goes from subjective to objective. With Mercury, and the ruler of Virgo, we're at this transitional place in the role of your evolution. And if you've reached that place, and if you have a predominant amount of Virgo energy or 6th house energy, you know what I'm talking about, because much of your life will be one of perhaps karma yoga, or a sense that you are doing something that is contributing to the larger whole, and you're having to work at it potentially every day. A very specific role that you play in your life. And many of us today on this panel have a predominant amount of Virgo energy, and that is because we are working with the world in a way to help look at ways that we can improve ourselves, ways that we can improve our journey. And is absolutely an energy of humiliation and staying humble and feeling small, and as it relates to that Pisces polarity, which is what we want to call God or the universe, and really experiencing that smallness. When we look at the evolutionary states, the first stage spiritual connects to the archetype of Virgo and that karma yoga that we all know oh so well. All right, so I wanted to share a story before we dive in. Many years ago, not long after I got into this work, I was a mother of 2 young toddlers, attempting to leave corporate America and become an astrologer and balance everything that exists within being a mother and a working woman in the world, and being able to just keep the family balanced in the best way I could. But ultimately, my needs were really last on that list. I didn't have time to take care of myself. And I have a friend at the time that said, you know, I've really got to take you to this yoga class. And I told her, I said, well, the last time that I went to a yoga class, the one and only time, and at this point I'm 35 years old, believe it or not, it was hardwood floors and a lot of mirrors, and there was a guy up there, really bendy. I couldn't touch my toes. It was a horrible experience. And I just thought I would never do yoga again, but that obviously was not what natural yoga is all about. So she said, I am picking you up on Saturday and taking you to this class. This woman teaches yoga in her garage. And I'm thinking, okay, how great could yoga in someone's garage be? So it's just this really simple home in a little neighborhood, and you would never know by the outside of the garage the world that I would enter. The garage opened, probably 8 mats on that floor in there. And when the garage closed, that door closed, I felt like I had been transported to Bali. It was the smells, it was the decorations, the music, the energy of this space, the candles, everything. It was unbelievable. It really went from Virgo to Pisces that quickly for me. And I knew that it didn't matter what happened in that yoga class that day. I was experiencing altogether a new expression of what it meant to practice yoga. Which made me think of Leo, of course, and then the chaturanga, you know, the different flow that you would move into for this practice brought me to tears. And at the very end of the class, we're laying in Shavasana, and I remember my teacher walking around the room and rubbing the back of all the participants' neck and rubbing some lavender oil on their third eye. And when she got to me, I could smell the lavender before it even, you know, hit my third eye, and I just started to sob. And I look at this image right here, and it almost could bring me to tears again. But this is the surrender, this feeling so small and trying to carry the world on your shoulders, and then just allowing yourself to move into a practice or a space where everything lifts. Your heart is open to something so eternal, and you do surrender in that space. And it became a practice that I took on probably 5 days a week for 4 years that followed. And I had a serious back injury from it was a sports injury, and this practice healed everything in my back. And of course, I became the healer in conjunction with the practice, in conjunction with opening that portal to get the help from on high. But that is also a very Virgo Pisces polarity experience, where you're able to really allow yourself to dedicate to a practice, a daily practice, a meditation, walks in nature, whatever it might be, so you could feel more directly aligned to what can heal you and what can allow you to feel replenished and connected to something more eternal. So that is my incredible personal experience of gaining more health and connection through a Virgo practice of yoga. All right, so Mercury is the sign that rules Virgo, and Mercury, of course, rules the throat chakra, how we express ourselves, the details in our days, how we communicate, what it is that we think about, the thoughts that we feed ourselves in any given moment. And so Mercury does rule Virgo, and here it is seen as a ruler of the throat chakra. Okay, Stacie and I, not long ago, did a 3-part series on the Daemon archetype, and I'd love for you to take it from here and share about how Virgo reflects part of this mutable axis seen with the Daemon archetype and a natural expression of Virgo in this context. Stacie.
Well, so if we look at the totality of nature, which is symbolized in the archetypes of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, we have a whole diversity of sentient life, which is the creation of God. And we all have a specific function. And it isn't a matter of who is superior or inferior, because even the most inferior have an equally relevant function. In Virgo, we have this diversity in nature. And in Sag, we have these natural laws. And in Virgo, we have these things coming together, and, they constantly interface. And there's things that that nature does to maintain itself and to maintain its health and to just keep it moving, keep it growing. And so I don't know, I guess from a Daemon or from a Daemon perspective, Virgo really is that archetype that allows us to see ourselves, like see the whole, not just ourselves. We're seeing our place in the whole, and we want to have a focus on how we're going to help that whole thrive.
Absolutely. And also, of course, the Virgo archetype is shown here, connects to the domesticated animals that we share our lives with.
Mm-hmm.
And so in essence, with Gemini, we talked a lot about the diversity in nature. With Virgo, it is about the connection to our animals that are pure emotion, seen with a polarity to Pisces, pure emotion. And all of us have pets on this panel, and many of those that are listening to, these are our family. And this is how we connect to that pure emotion that is so often missing in our lives out in the world with those that we interface with. So Virgo does connect to the domesticated animals or pets.
Yeah, sorry, I left that out.
Okay. And I love this image. And any of you listening who have a strong mutable axis, who feel very connected to nature, feel very connected to animals, to the souls of animals that just love you unconditionally through that polarity to Pisces, that's what it is. Like, everything to them. And so that is so healing for the Virgo to experience the unconditional love of an animal. Mm-hmm. All right, Stace. Are we saving our pet stories for the end?
Yes, we're saving those for the end.
All right, what we always do at this time too, before we jump into the specific planets, is we discuss current events and things that are going on in the world right now. And it's just been an incredible tour. Because right before this series started, the Black Lives Matter movement kicked into gear with the murder of George Floyd. There's been just so many different big events. It's at the very onset of this journey in early June, and they continue to manifest. I mean, there's COVID obviously already happening. And so we've got politics and pandemics and a real political divide. We've got movements happening. And so, of course, Virgo, when we think of Virgo, we think of the global health crisis. We think about what it is that we need to do to stay safe and clean and sterilized, and how our health workers out there, the nurses, the doctors, that sixth house phenomena, being of service, but it's definitely a medical archetype in this way, what they're doing to sacrifice even their own health to be on the front lines for all of us. And so before this webinar, Stacie and I were talking about, you know, what's going on right now. I mean, every week it's something else. More Black people seem to be dying, and police officers involved, and at the hands of police officers, at the hand of authorities, everything is reaching a critical mass along these lines. So Stacie, I'd like you to just kind of share what you were talking to me about earlier.
Yeah, I think all of us can recognize that this is a time where we have many different crises, whatever, that are coming to a head together simultaneously. We have this pandemic. We have the impact that the pandemic has on the economy. We have, we're in an election year, and so we are needing to evaluate the different candidates that, well, at least in the USA, who are running for president, in order to really just discern the best plan for how to fix the problems that we face in the present and how to improve the future. And within that, relative to America, it's a time, it's part of the Virgo process where, you know, we've had the self-glory, and it's not that the self-glory goes away, but it's now a time of self-evaluation. What's working, what doesn't, what is it that we are, and what is it that we're not? And what is, you know, the thing that we're not is going to tend to be the focus in a Virgo context, because and the whole point of it, the whole evolutionary impulse there is to it's to reorient the consciousness from, hey, it's all about me, the world revolves around me, I'm the special force here, to, oh, here's this world, here are all these other people, here are these problems, here are the skills that I can contribute to that, how can I apply those things to make things better? And it just seems that we have so many things that are competing for this type of attention all at once. And so it's a pretty intense time. It's a time where we really need to use that Virgo critical analysis to really think about the problems and think about what's needed. And it's no longer about the self-glory. The self-glory, it's a humiliation process. It's time to see our place in the world and to take action in a productive way, because that is the essence of Virgo. You can't just solve problems by thinking about them. You have to do something. It's a moving archetype. The energy, it's in the moving that evolution occurs. It's in the step by step. It's not getting so caught up in all of the drama, because this is another Virgo phenomena, which is when there's all these crises, if you try to stop and analyze one particular crisis, then you're just going to get paralyzed. So, you know, the thing Wolfe used to always say is just one step in front of the other. And so I think that's just something that's really important for us to really remember right now and try to apply in our lives right now.
That's excellent. And just by putting yourself in motion, right? Mm-hmm. Right, literally just saying, what can I do in this moment to help, you know, become more productive, or to think more positively about what I can impact or affect. And of course, another Virgo teaching that I love so much that Jesus used to say is, the last shall come first. And I think the last are really stomping their feet right now, or those that feel like they've been put last.
Yes.
And also the tribe, the chief was always the last one to eat. These are natural expressions of how to keep harmony in the whole. And it is very much a Virgo expression. And we are experiencing it in the world today in this way. And so everybody's got to, instead of getting overwhelmed by how we can make a change when it feels so massive, and in the next few months in this country, in particular in the United States, I realize there's other people that are watching who are not from this country, but
absolutely.
Any little thing we can do to help bring more healing and wholeness to the world, that's our job. And it starts with the thoughts that we think about, the things that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that collective web that nature is. You know, it's like a big spider web. We all
We can finish that thought. The spider web.
the spider web, you know, we all have a role to play, and it can work out. It, you know, it's not going to be just endless problems. We can actually apply solutions that will work things out and make things better. And the key point here is making it better for all, not just a select few.
Mm-hmm. And then when you think about the inverted pyramid, doesn't that make sense, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking about all. Here we are, but we're thinking about all and everything that we do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to jump in and bring on our first guest. We have Deva Green with us today, starting. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me back. It's really a blessing to be here with all of you today in a true Virgo fashion, sacrificing your time.
Exactly. Oh, see, we could be here on the lake or wherever this is.
Says the fifth house, right? Where could I be right now? So yeah, from my understanding today, I'm going to be sharing about Pluto in Virgo, or Pluto in the sixth house, and also Neptune in Virgo, or Neptune in the sixth house. And from what you guys have shared already, that's exactly from a natural point of view how the Virgo, Pluto in Virgo, or Pluto in the sixth house, relative to that bottom line orientation to self-perfect, to self-improve, to essentially become impeccable. It's going to be a driving force within these souls to become impeccable. And how can I do this? Unconsciously then, because when we're looking at Pluto, we're magnifying an archetype, or that archetype is coming to a laser-like focus. So one of the navigation points, or those that are born with Pluto and Virgo, or the sixth house, is that all of the faults, all of the imperfections, every place that they're feeling not inwardly right, are going to be orientated or linked to the Aries through Leo, the subjective orientation, the self-development. Now remember that those parts of development are essential. Those are necessary, as both Kristin and Stacie, you guys were sharing. It's a transitional archetype. So in terms of integrating and in terms of interpreting that feeling via the square to Sag, so much of the journey is how we interpret things. So that feeling of inner lack, or that feeling of what isn't right here, it's always going to indicate where there's an orientation from the first to the fifth, or Aries to Leo. And that's a natural evolutionary transition. It's a natural juncture, so that we can enter the Libra sphere, or when we get to the seventh house, we can participate as an equal. Stacie, as you were pointing out, it's not superior, it's not inferior, it's equal. And when we look at the sign of Virgo, it's all the work that we have to do to get there. And that can create a very humble, pure, and a soul that never gets too full of themselves, never becomes too big for their britches, so to speak. And I know a beautiful story of a soul that was born with Pluto and Virgo in the sixth house in Sag, conjunct the south node. And to be honest, I have never known a soul that advocates the underdogs more than this little soul that I know. Everything about this guy is completely about advocating for those who are considered second best. He was on a soccer team where he championed those that were on the B team. A team and B team, and he took the captain of the B team because he really wanted to put himself in a situation where he was serving the whole, where he was contributing his gifts so that everybody within that tribe could grow, evolve, could become the best that they could be. And even for me, it was amazing that this little guy, I remember that just to make you guys laugh, to try and lighten up the subject, that I was slacking off, to be honest. I was goofing around. I wasn't doing the best that I could. And there he comes, and Pluto on the south node, and says, hey, and Virgo in the sixth house, that if you're not doing your best, then what are you doing? And I can tell you that ever since that day, it's been like, oh, if I'm not doing my best, then my Virgo kicks in, and I go, well, I need to be doing a little bit better right now. So, I mean, looking at this energy, that it's very much about self-sacrifice, but in the natural point of view, that as Jesus said, Kristin, as you were sharing, Jesus has Pluto and Virgo in the ninth house, with Mars, which is a new phase, also in Virgo in the ninth house. In the end, the last will come first. And really speaking to the truth of how, as a whole, or the ones who in the end the meek will inherit the earth. And from that space, offering himself or sacrificing himself so that everybody could realize their divine potential. And very much, Stacie, as you were sharing, coming from that fifth house, it was so the opposite of here I am. Here I am with my specialness, and it's about me being yes, or saying that I'm, the son of God and worship me. No, it was very much the opposite. It was sacrificing himself. It was putting himself last so that the collective could understand their connection to the universal whole, that we all emanate from the same source, that we all have divine potential. And putting ourselves last is actually an act of embracing that humanity via the 12th house polarity point, that it's not debasing oneself, it's not self-denial, it's not a sense of, I need to punish myself, so I'm never going to allow myself anything. No, it's very much more of a sense of, I'm going to put myself at the bottom so that everybody wins, so that everybody can reach their potential, that everybody can, via the fifth house, what came before, everybody can actualize, everybody can contribute their gifts. So it's very much a sense of the work function, as you were sharing, Kristin, the work function, the specific work function that is right for the soul can become purification, so that any sense of inferiority, or we've all heard of Virgo spoke about as this never-ending sense of lack, shame, doubt, crisis, never being good enough. And yes, what a way to purge that, or a way to embrace that in its most natural sense, or to jettison it when it's not healthy, when it's not functioning, is aligning with karma yoga, because it becomes a natural way for the soul to pierce the balloon of self-inflation, to purify and perfect in a way that really brings out those souls' healing gifts, so it can go into any situation and offer means for improvement. That, Kristin, as you were sharing, to come in with the orientation of, what difference can I make here, big, small, what can I do to help contribute to make this better, not just for me, but for everybody. And that's very much the opposite of never-ending criticism, or throwing the hand grenades of arrogance of those that can stand back and say, oh, this is never good enough. When looking at the purification, or the most natural way, from my point of view, to de-inflate that ego, or to self-improve, or to self-perfect, is to align with a karma yoga via the 12th house polarity point, that allows a divine, or allows that connection to an internal energy, to something that's much larger than ourselves, and in the best possible way, reminds the soul just how small we are in that, from that point of view. That very much the feeling of being the speck of sand upon the beach, and it creates a sense of feeling connected to totality, feeling connected to the whole, understanding that again, in the end, that we're just that really small speck of sand. And a beautiful, to me, a beautiful illustration in a movie that I saw that reflects this, because often what can happen is that we can integrate that through failure. Um, Virgo is connected to the 10th house archetype, the earth archetypes as well. And oftentimes it's like this breaking this drive to always have to be perfect, breaking this drive for perfectionism, and this delusive notion of never we can never make a mistake. And how false is that? I mean, our greatest mistakes can become our greatest teachers, Sag Virgo, right? It's not about being perfect, it's about learning from your mistakes and adjusting from there. That's really the only focus on mistakes that, from my point of view, we would really need to have. The little saying that every saint has a future, or every saint has a past, every sinner has a future, right? Virgo 12th house. And a movie that illustrates this is from City of Angels, where this doctor, Virgo, is just very well known. She's just almost absolutely perfect in her work, and she has this really mundane case. A person comes in whose heart had stopped because they'd been jogging and they went into cardiac arrest. So she's sitting there listening to Jimi Hendrix going, just another day of the scrubbers, doo-doo-doo, I can do this, I got this. And beyond her control, the guy dies on her operating table. He develops a lethal arrhythmia, a heart murmur, and he goes. And there's an angel waiting to take him, and he's watching her suffer because she has to go into the room after she has to go meet the family, and she has to explain to them that the person did not survive on her operating table. And in that scene, she's in a hallway all by herself, and she's talking about how small she feels, how big the room has gotten, just how small she feels, and the angel comes and he hugs her. And to me, that's that Virgo 12th house of surrendering. It was just the guy's time to go. There was really nothing that she could have done to prevent this. And it really broke that sense of perfectionism. It really broke that sense of how Virgo can just get hardwired into this never being able to make a mistake. And through the surrendering, oftentimes through events that at times we can't control, it affects, or it pushes us towards that 12th house polarity point of connectedness, of eternal energy, of healing that sense of lack, or of, as you were saying, taking it one step at a time, fumbling through ecstasy. And in that way, because so many of the Pluto and Virgos are in the 6th house, can, when you essentially are in a laser-like way, burying themselves to the bone. I mean, analyzing themselves to the very bone, and it can bring these feelings of aloneness. And via the 12th house polarity point, it's when you work towards that 12th house polarity point, and alone but not alone, that only a relationship with the divine, or only a relationship with the creator, can really heal that sense. Where's the imperfect, or it's a way of saying where's the fault in the imperfection? That we're all connected to something much higher, much more eternal than the analysis of Virgo, or when you identify with that small piece, right? That we're a part of a eternal whole. And in that way, it can feel that healings of lack. Again, they can step into the room and really put themselves first, like the doctors, the animal healers. So many of the Pluto and Virgos are also being pulled towards the environment. trying to solve crises that really are around coming together via that 12th house, that we're all connected, that we're all impacted by this, and big or small, we'll fumble towards ecstasy together. we'll figure this out, you know, and relative then to Neptune being in the 6th house, that the relative to becoming inspired by the creator, or where we're most naturally meant to spiritualize. John Lennon had Neptune in Virgo in the 6th house, pretty close conjunct to his North Node in Libra, also in the 6th. And in terms of karma yoga, that it was like his music gave him a way to integrate as an equal with others, seeing the North Node being in Libra in the 6th house. The song Imagine, the lyrics from Imagine everybody living as one. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And so he's really being inspired by these feelings of a service to others, putting oneself at the bottom, not in a distorted sacrificial way, but that again, relative to the alignment with timeless universal laws, in the end, the meek will inherit the earth. The last will come first. We're our brother's keepers, and so on. So his music, from my point of view, was really an instrument for this purification process. Again, in the most natural way, that it was helping him pierce delusions of grandeur or self-importance that he may have come in with, and it was helping him align with the Virgo qualities of humility, self-effacement, helping those in need, and putting yourself at the bottom, or seeing what everybody else need first, experiencing that inverted pyramid. And so when we see Neptune in the 6th house, that these souls will naturally be drawn towards this type of orientation. Like the true karma yoga won't be about focusing on, oh, you know, here's every place that I'm not right, or here, you know, never ending list of perfection of, you know, faults, but it's more, you know, this line of work really allows me to center into a purification that benefits everybody. I really feel that through this process, I'm aligning my ego with something higher. I'm piercing my self-importance. I'm really able to make this paradigm shift from the top of the pyramid to the bottom in the most natural way. And to, of course, it will never be perfect, but it's the process, Stacie, as you were sharing, the process of becoming perfect, putting that one foot in front of the other, and as Yogananda says, just try and be a little bit of a better person every day, and if you don't make it, oh well, you just stand up and you try again the next day. So it can be these real simple things that help the Virgo energy align with the most natural expression of self-sacrifice, humility, self-effacement, healing, really bringing out these souls' healing capacities to their maximum. So those are my thoughts. That's my talk for this segment.
Thank you, Deva. I just always enjoy your insights so much. They're just really focused on the essence of all of the things that evolutionary astrology is about. And you know, one of my personal sayings, one of the things that I found myself just kind of declaring in my own life is, I think that the most powerful power around is natural humility. And it's because there isn't this holdup, there isn't this, it doesn't matter how you look, it doesn't matter what other people think. the focus is on wanting to improve, wanting to make things better, wanting to make a difference, wanting to serve. And so there's just constant movement and just this analytical focus on, you know, what can I try now? What can I try now? And just fixing things. It's the most empowered state, at least that I've ever been in, is a natural state of humility. Frankly, when I get into my ego, my Leo thing, I feel more disempowered a little bit, but it's through that natural humility where it just doesn't matter what your role is. It's what you're doing that really makes a difference. And your words just really reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah, and I was just thinking as well that in natural times and in matriarchal times, most of the time, maybe all the time, women held the power, shamans, teachers, and otherwise, and yet their role was the same as the corn picker. So, you know, everybody had a role in society and everybody played their part and nobody was any better than the other guy. Yeah. And so there is something really powerful and empowering about feeling that you are contributing to something larger. You don't need to compare yourself to anybody else. You just need to do what you can to help and bring who you are to this world and add on to it in some way and to be of service. And so I agree. I remember way back when an old friend of mine said to me, what else is there to do but the work? What else is there to do, really? Because when we're leaving this world and we're leaving our body and we're looking back on our life, we aren't going to think about what we've got, materially speaking. We're going to think about who we helped. We're going to think about how we've grown. We're going to think about what we took on that we don't have to do next time, which is a very, very much about being able to access the courage within ourselves, the emotional courage within ourselves, which is a natural sextile, the emotion, the natural sextile to Virgo. Courage to evolve. And I shared a quote that was actually offered at the Democratic Convention by Biden, who was sharing something his mother used to tell him, that bravery resides in every heart, and at some point it will be summoned. And we know through the Virgo archetype, that tells us the kind of work that we're going to have to do in order, through accessing that bravery, work that we're going to have to do that we will ultimately will feel proud of, and that we've contributed in some way at the end of our time. What else is there to do but the work? And the work that is difficult, it's that kind of work, though, that helps to chip away at the inner void that the Virgo archetype can feel so directly.
Right. Exactly. That's one of the most natural ways to summon that courage, is to align yourself with karma yoga that really brings out those qualities that you were speaking of. Because when we feel aligned with something higher than ourselves, or when we feel aligned with a higher purpose, eternal energy, it naturally summons a sense of bravery that in its, not to sound dramatic, but in some cases, it can be souls who say to themselves, you know, what's one little insignificant life? If everything's, you know, on the line here, and if only, if I can sacrifice, if only, you know, if something beneficial can come from one person sacrificing, then yeah, you know, I'm on board that uh, I'll purify myself so that I can do that, or that I can summon that courage that you were speaking of to grow and to evolve and do the necessary work.
You know, it's incredible. I had another thought that in this speech that Biden gave when he was sharing about a conversation he had with George Floyd's daughter. I think she was 3 years old or something. And she kept saying to him, my daddy was a hero, or my daddy is a hero. I mean, he sacrificed his life Obviously not consciously doing this, but I'm sure on a soul level, his soul knew well in advance what was happening. But a massive movement took place. And now this little girl, his daughter, thinks of her father as a hero. He sacrificed his life for the state of his, for minorities, for the Black race. And so it can be that way, just kind of putting yourself in the line of fire sometimes through the inconjunct Aries.
Yeah, right. And then you probably had no conscious desire to be seen as such, but by sacrificing, look at what then happens.
Right.
So yeah, it's this, right, the unconscious.
Well, you just never really know how big and global and massive one little act, that was a major act, but anything that we do, any small step we feel that we take can actually set in motion something much bigger than we know.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much, Deva. It was wonderful as always. Thank you for being here, and we'll just move here now to our next guest. Stacie, I'll let you introduce her.
I don't know where my...
Oh, I will then.
Thank you.
Patricia Walsh, my goodness, she's first time we get to see her so far. She's a busy girl and so excited to, I know that she's got some Virgo energy to share with us. So welcome, Patricia, Sag lady, but Pluto, I
Actually,
know.
you know, I'm a Pluto, Uranus, and Virgo in the 6th house, right? So I got a lot of Virgo going on. I always say, oh, my Virgo, oh, my Virgo. So speaking of my Virgo, I want to start with a little story, and then I'm going to zoom out to my Sag and Mercury and give a whole big, broad picture. When I was young, I was enamored with the Holy Spirit. I was raised Roman Catholic. And I wasn't so interested in the personages of Christianity. And the reason why this is relevant is because we know that the Virgo-Pisces axis is associated with Christianity, and that we're coming to the conclusion of this sub-age of the Pisces, the Pisces age. And okay, so I was in love with the Holy Spirit, and to me, what the Holy Spirit represented before I had the words to say it was that it's the divine immanent, here, present, now, not off somewhere else, not transcendent, it's immediately in front of you, right? This is a real core thing of the Virgo archetype to me. And I'm gonna backtrack to get back to where I started. I was in, and when I used to go into churches, I used to always want to take my shoes off, because it was like, I guess it was part of my Indian past lives coming through, Asian Indian past lives coming through, to walk into temples barefoot. But I always felt that, right? Because it was contact with the ground and the divine being present. So fast forward to 20 years ago, and I was in Paris in Notre Dame, and I was having a conversation with the Holy Spirit and God, and I was saying, I was so angry. I was filled with this rage. And I said, how could you let the Catholic Church be your representative here on earth, right? With all of the discrepancies and all of the horrific history of the Catholic Church. And I was enraged, right? I was like, how could you? I need this answer. I need to know how this became the institution that carries this sacred energy of Christos, of enlightenment, of whatever you want to call it in the mystic Christian traditions. And so immediately synchronicity started happening, and I can't go into the big long story, but this woman walks up to me in a sushi bar out of nowhere and basically says to me, I have to talk to you. And this is, remember, 20 years ago, long before the Da Vinci Code. She took me on a kind of Da Vinci Code on-coding of Paris through all of the Templar mysteries. And all of this, we ended up, it was crazy what happened, but my answer came to me. And the answer that came to me was, in order for something to be revealed, it needs to be hidden first, right? And this is the esoteric meaning of the archetype of Virgo. She is the one who hides the light. And when we talk about, and that's the ultimate service. right? The ultimate service from her, this pregnant virgin on this transitional before we arise above the horizon. She, just like Cancer is the womb, is the service to give birth to the human form, right? The Virgo womb gives birth to the Christed self, to the spiritual self. That's what's gestating in her womb. She's one, to me, Virgo is one of the most esoteric signs, archetypes. What I want to do is I want to reference the Gnostic story of creation as quickly as I can. It's a big, long story in the Nag Hammadi text. Part of it's in the Pista Sophia. But a while ago, I gave a talk at Norwalk where I was addressing the imbalances of yin yang and the Greek Roman mythos, right? And how, because we all know it's patricized. And I was reassigning, so, you know, we have like a feminine sign, but it has a masculine planet or vice versa. And it just seemed out of whack with me. So I was like, well, the solar system, according to Pat, would be, right? So Mercury as ruler of Gemini is clear. Okay, all of the myth of Mercury and Hermes, it really fits Gemini. And then the inner side, we still get Mercury. And I was like, no, she should be named Sophia, right? And Sophia in the Gnostic tradition is the creatress goddess. So I want to tell you the alternate story quickly so you can just quickly decondition from the patricized version of Christianity. Sophia is part of what's called the syzygy. She is a pair with another being called Christos, and they live in the pleroma, right? And the pleroma is this unmanifest part of the divine. They are emanations of the divine. They're not separate from the divine, but a way you can think of it is like a stepped down urge of the divine. And they are, syzygies are creative potential. So Sophia and Christos are a syzygy. And it's like, if you think of the image of Shiva as the creator, creatus in the Nataraj image of the crazy dance that brings creation into form, that is what syzygies are like, right? The syzygies in the Gnostic tradition are like the combination of their energy spins out galaxies and universes and all of that. And it's because of this complementary pair of opposites, which is what syzygy means. And they birth something, the third thing between them. So she's part of this pair, right? And they're spinning off these universes, and Earth is starting to get spun off, and Sophia becomes extremely curious about, think of the qualities of Mercury. She becomes very curious about what are those people, what are those forms going to be like? What is that creation going to be like? What is that happening? And she goes to the edge of the pleroma to look with her longing and her thinking and her curiosity, and she falls out of the pleroma. And in all of the aeons of time, this has never happened. No syzygy has ever become separate, and none has ever left the pleroma. And so Sophia falls out of the pleroma in this creative churning, I would say, is the best. I have a kind of image of chaos of it, right? Because what immediately happens around her is that chaos ensues. And all, again, thinking of the archetype of Virgo, right? She's in a real crisis. And out of this crisis, all of these, this is really interesting. I really have to bullet point this because it's a big, long story. But all of these demiurges are born, and the Judeo-Christian God of Yahweh is born, and claims himself to be the real God. And then there's this whole other beings that come out of him called archeons. Now you can imagine why the Gnostic texts would have been considered heretical, because everything that the Catholic Church had decided was to be talked about as the tradition of Christianity, it was actually counter to, because in the Gnostic creation story, the creatress goddess is a goddess. It's Sophia, because so out of her spins this false god called Yahweh, and then out of her spins all of the order of beings that we know on Earth, all of this. And she has so much compassion for them. And when we were talking about sacrifice, this is in the Gnostic story too. She has so much compassion for them that she gives her body to give them a home to live. And she is known as the soul of the world. And we also call her Gaia. So the spirit that we call the soul, the animus mundi of the earth itself, is Sophia. Now, Sophia carries forward in Christian tradition as the wisdom of God. She is the principle that is the Holy Spirit, right? The feminine principle. She is that principle. But in this case, or in the Gnostic story, her longing, and when we talk about this existential void that exists within Virgo, her longing to return to the pleroma is what draws Christos to earth. Yet she is also called, and this is really interesting, in the Pistis Sophia, which is a book of the Nag Hammadi text, she is called a light maiden, and she's called Parthenos Lucius. Parthenos lends itself, again, we get back to the idea of the pregnant virgin. Parthenos lends itself to the principle of parthenogenesis, which is the ability to recreate from oneself without fertilization. And so Virgo as an archetype here is representing the spiritual womb that exists within all of us that is longing, and the longing for the return is the fire for the path, right? The longing for the return to the pleroma for her to reveal the Christos is the continual process that the earth is in. Now it all became Christianized, patricized, and I don't want to get into all of that. But I want to restore the beauty of this feminine energy of Virgo that she is the one who reveals the glory of spirit. And it is through hiding that it becomes revealed, right? So, in the big picture, it's as much a part of the divine plan as it is falling away from the divine and returning to the divine, if that makes sense. So when we think of Mercury as the ruler, to me, I think of Mercury as ruler of Virgo as Sophia. And fortunately, in the Greek Roman mythos, Mercury is kind of hermaphrodite, right? So he swings both ways. She swings both ways, or contains both within, which again carries forward this parthenogenesis, right? FYI, this version of the Gnostic story, I'm telling you, the light maiden, right? The Parthenos Lucius, she's associated with the constellation or some of the stars of Virgo and Libra called Astrea, right? Which brings some versions or brings some energy of Mercury back to it in that this is too complicated because Virgo and Libra used to actually be a combined constellation. So the scales that now belong to Libra used to belong to Astrea. And she was seen as a goddess of justice. But this weighing, this discerning that happens is exactly what Mercury is doing as the ruler of Virgo. So like I said, when Mercury is ruler of Gemini, we can say, oh yes, that's all, collecting and reaching out and gathering information and it's energy like this. But as Sophia, right, as the feminine side, the ruler inside, all of this goes inside, right? And it's what can be discerned within, what can be distilled within, because the eternal process that's going on is always about the revelation of spirit, if we realize it or not. So we can say we're consciously cooperating with evolution and on some kind of spiritual path where we are engaged within this process of self-reflection, of self-discernment, of self, right? This is all Sophia acting Sophia as Mercury acting inwards. In the glyph of Mercury, you know, you have the cross of matter and the circle of spirit, the circle of spirit, and then the crescent on top, right? And so, you know, in essence, the glyph of Mercury is about the matter and spirit above matter and reaching for inspiration, right? So there's this eternal energy of reaching. Again, Virgo to me is the womb of the spiritual self, which then goes through all of the tests and trials of, like you were saying, Kristin, you know, all of the process, the more refined transpersonal processes that happen above the horizon that start in Libra. You know, where we have to kind of refine what it is that's been discovered or revealed within the self. But one of the interesting things that came to me through that, you know, the light has to be hidden for it to be revealed. And that's one of the mysteries of the universe, that the hiding is not, matter is not the antithesis of spirit. It's an actual part of spiritual process. Right? That's the beauty of it. It works completely synergistically, just as it should, is that the Catholic Church itself hides the light. And the church is not the thing, right? So in essence, the church is like the church of the Antichrist. It's not the real thing. The real mystery is hidden within. Right? The real mystery is just like in every mystery tradition, there's the outer temple, that's the exoteric where the public goes, and the inner temple where the initiates go, right? And so this process, this Mercury process, this Sophia process that I'm talking about is the birth of gnosis, right? And that is what gnosis means. Gnosis means knowledge. And so Mercury as ruler of Virgo is that drawing of gnosis that comes from being able to connect the inner world and the outer world, distill it within that kind of alchemical process of separation, distillation, which reaches discernment, right? Or discernment is the outcome of that. This is all the process of Sophia. You also asked me, or I said I would talk about Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury. And if you think of the glyph, at least the one that I use, there's two of them, but the glyph of Uranus is the two, you know, the cross of matter in the center, and then the two crescents on the side. That is, again, this idea of the reaching out, right? This is a reaching out energy, but it's an attunement of both right brain and left brain. It's like if you look at the archetype, or you look at the glyph of Uranus, it's like an antenna. Right? So when we think of this glyph of Uranus, and we think of it again, I have Uranus in Virgo, it can become, well, it can be a curse, blessing and a curse, right? Because it can give this bi-directional awareness of what's personal to oneself and what's also in the collective, which as Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, would be doing, tuning into this individuated collective. But we also know Uranus as the archetype of liberation, right? And so the same thing that I was talking about, that Sophia is hiding the light, and Christos is part of the longing for Christos, and the return of Christos, or the revelation of the Christos within, is part of the redemption of matter. This Uranus in Virgo brings that energy of liberation, right? So it brings to it that energy of the liberation of the spark within, the liberation of the spark of spirit within matter. Again, not transcendent, but within the cross of matter, right? And it's through the cross of matter. I mean, this whole idea, you know, that woman is dirty, and the earth is dirty, and matter is dirty, and animals, you know, when we talk about the daemon, right? To be fused with nature. I mean, that is Gaia Sophia. She is that. There isn't any separation. Do you know what I mean? It's only separated when you demean this feminine aspect, right? Then it's like, then there's this whole separative consciousness that comes out of it, but that's all a lie. You know, that's all the lie of the outer church. There's nothing to do with the holy holies, the holy of the holies, the temple within, right? This is to me well, part of the beauty of this archetype of Virgo. You know, like I said, she hides the light so that the light can be revealed.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you, Patricia. That was amazing. You're so smart. Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, the interface of the lower octave and the higher octave. And when you put it in the context of Virgo and the context of religion, because part of Virgo, you know, everything is judged by some kind of standard of conduct that we've internalized. And, you know, at the Mercury level, we're sort of, it's kind of immediacy. And when we get to to Uranus, it's becoming objective, it's becoming new. We're listening kind of for that universal drumbeat that gives us new inspiration and therefore wisdom, which, you know, is reflected in Sophia as you presented it. So I'm
well, and Uranus also, because its objectification gives the ability to liberate, but it's through the process of discernment, right? You use the word, I always use this word for Virgo, introjection. And when you put Uranus in Virgo, you're interjecting not just your personal conditioning, but the whole collective. So there's a whole lot of discernment that needs to happen there. And as we know, Uranus, as ruler of Aquarius, follows the deconditioning process that happens in Capricorn, right? So that's all part of it, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I love how you brought the woman, of course, into the story and, I don't know, gave it a new rulership, right? Virgo, because I mean, it is so strange how Mercury and Virgo both are rulers. The ruler for Mercury, sorry, what is it? Mercury's opposing Neptune today. I can't get my words out.
I know.
Mercury, the ruler for Gemini and Virgo, never made any sense to me. So,
well, I reassigned all of the rulers in the solar. So like, you know, Saturn as the ruler of Capricorn is like, huh? Capricorn's yin, like, hello. So I had to go to another myth and use another myth to kind of describe the esoteric meaning of, if I would have named Saturn, it would have been, you know, Shakti Maya, right? And here's the reason why, because this is what it reveals about the archetype.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was awesome. Yeah, like Sue Hilliard said, wow. It was a big wow. And thank you for taking us on that journey. Mercury and Uranus are considered brothers. Of course, it's a boy again, right? Uranus being the higher octave.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Huh? So I would encourage everybody to read a version of the Gnostic creation story with Sophia. Yeah. It will decondition all of that guilt and shame and crap that came from the Catholic Church and put it square back where it needs to be.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
All right. So we're gonna thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have you back for, when are you going to be back? Which archetype are you going to?
I don't remember.
Sag, right?
Sag, probably Sag. Yeah.
Sag, maybe even Capricorn. I don't know. We'll have her back again.
Okay. Thank you. Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, Ari, you are next.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So on the topic of deconditioning from all the guilt and shame and crap of the Judeo-Christian cosmology, let's start with Saturn. So Saturn in the 6th house. I was thinking earlier, and this would be about 10 minutes ago when I realized that I have Saturn and not Uranus. I was thinking Uranus. And it's so sixth house like me to not realize that. So the first thought I had was that Jeffrey Wolfe Green quote regarding Virgo sixth house is one step at a time. One step at a time. And I thought this is probably the most true when you combine Capricorn and Virgo with each other. So sixth house isn't inherently about time in the sense that it's obviously of our physical reality, something that we're going to improve upon and work with. And Saturn, Capricorn, is of time. And there's an indirect association with Virgo that relates to time, because everything that you're going to improve is going to happen over time. So when you bring the Saturn archetype into the sixth house, there's a specific relationship to time. Like, you can think of it in two ways. One, you're going to have to improve your relationship to time. You're going to have to improve your relationship to form, to structure, to time and space, to rules, to authority. On that level, there can be this deep sense of weight where it's perceived that life in some way or another, be it, government, society, authority, the body, a partner, that there is a very limiting experience of being here in time and space that is just weighing me down and proving to me how utterly worthless I actually am. And so there can be this deeply conditioned experience of inferiority, and Capricorn, Saturn, never quite getting there. I'm never going to improve the conditions, or the conditions of fill in the blank will never quite be improved. And yet it's that consciousness itself that is being improved. A part of the Saturn journey is always becoming aware of where we are conditioned. And the thing about conditioning is we're not aware of it. We're not aware of what we are repressing. We're not aware of the structures that are so crystallized in our mind until we become reflective of it, until we begin to internalize the feedback life is offering. Sixth house, is it working well? Am I living in a constant state of crisis where Saturn, things are never late, structure, solidity, it's never grounded, there's always something breaking, I'm always trying to fix something, there's always a crisis and I'm never quite getting there. It's like a reflection of constant failure, always being reflected back to oneself. And the idea is to become gradually aware of one's internal conditioning. Okay, this is a mindset of crisis that's rooted in an underlying sense of shame and guilt, and my life is structured, is designed to just fall apart and not function very well because I'm deserving of some kind of punishment. I'm wrong, I'm bad, I need to be, hurt in some way. And so Saturn in the sixth house, or Virgo, can very much express as this very strong masochism, wherein a soul imagines that they need to be punished or hurt and suffer for something that is wrong with them. Now, as per Saturn, a lot of times the sense of guilt that we have can come from one of two places. If we've acted out of alignment and we have not acted with respect to the boundaries of time and space and all things that need to be respected, then there can be this sense of guilt. And thus we're learning how to, in this case, act with care and precision, to go slow, to be mindful, to be aware of each thing that we do. But there can be also this guilt within the Saturn archetype that is conditioned. Society says, and here's the Roman Catholic part coming in, here's an ideal of perfection, a way of being in physical time-space reality that is the right way. The routines, the practices, the natural, and we'll look at this with Jupiter, the square to Sagittarius 9th house. Cosmologies, perspectives, ways of thinking about reality that basically impose a sense of guilt and inferiority and less than. And we structure our lives, our routines, our ways of living, our systems of living, our relationship to our body, to our health, everything domesticated. That reflects this Judeo-Christian concept of wrong, bad. You're a sinner, and to get heaven, you got to atone for your sinfulness. And so everything will then be interpreted in one's life as reflecting back to oneself one's internalized sense of being wrong. The thing with the sixth house is it comes with a healthy amount of criticism. Anything in the sixth house is where we're self-improving. We're working on ourselves, we're healing. This means there needs to be a certain level of humility to be able to accept feedback. Often it's constructive feedback, Capricorn, Saturn. And the intention of that feedback is to then be able to become self-reflective and, okay, here, I made a mistake, I'm going to fix it. And this is where guilt can come in with the sixth house, where it's like, okay, I wasn't paying attention to the details, I made a mistake, and it's the sixth house. Okay, that's why I'm here. It's why I incarnated. It's why I have planets in the sixth house. I'm going to do better starting now. And Saturn, not let it reflect this idea that I'm just a horrible person. And what can happen with this signature is the criticism and the feedback from life. One, it can manifest in really harsh ways, right? Depending on how this is manifesting inside someone's consciousness, a soul might manifest an external reality with a lot of harsh punishment. You make a little mistake and it's the end of the world. You're sent to your room. You can't leave. You're grounded for 2 weeks, and all you did was break a dish or something like that. So there can be this very conditioned experience from childhood of being punished. Shame, wrong. You can have experience of having been a slave, right? You did something wrong and you're going to get punished for that. And so there can be the psychology of servitude, of living as if I'm needing to be vigilant and do everything right. And if there's a reflection of not being perfect, that can easily be internalized as, okay, I'm either a bad person, or the Saturn thing is often to project one's internalized self-judgment onto the outer world and to believe everyone is judging me and criticizing me and pointing out all the things that are wrong within me. And whether we're lost in our own sense of inferiority and shame and smallness, or if we believe everyone else is making us small. You know, Jeffrey Wolfe Green spoke about the sixth house really as masochism or sadism. The masochism is, Siri's asking me a question. Masochism is life sucks and it's my fault. I'm going to punish myself. Sadism is life sucks and it's your fault. I'm going to punish you. Both are actually ways of not healing. Both are ways of not working with time and form and space in a constructive way to use it what it's for, which is to grow. Yeah, it's going to take time. You can't rush it. But the good news is that's why you're here. It's what the body is all about. And you have as much time as you need, really. And so when we adopt the attitude of, I'm just going to attend to what's next, whether it's your healing practice or a relationship or your job or you're a writer, whatever's happening in that sixth house, the work is just to start over again. And that's that 12th house polarity that basically says forgiveness. A lot of people with the sixth house struggle oftentimes with alcoholism or substance abuse issues because it's really reflecting this deep sense of, I'm just so screwed up. Life is so screwed up. I have no control over it. And of course, one of the deep teachings of the sixth house in general is you just start where you are and you clean up. I once had a really beautiful dream that really speaks to the sixth house. And if you think of Saturn in there, it's just so compassionate. I was with a friend of mine who's also one of my teachers, and we were in front of a garden, and I saw the garden was full of weeds. And I was overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, this garden is full of weeds. It's a lost cause. Forget about it. And he just very lovingly, with a smile, bent down and picked one weed up. One weed. And the reflection of that dream for me was, okay, it is not for me to know how long this will take, how long healing and alignment and wellness will really take to crystallize and land fully in my experience. Oh, shoot, I just took all this time to talk about one thing. Okay, forgot. I was thinking that I'll get the closing thoughts at the whatever. Anyway, you get the idea. A little bit on Jupiter now. This will just give me more to edit when this is transcribed. Darn it. Okay. So Jupiter is always about being natural, authentic, and sincere. So when you put Jupiter in the 6th house, a part of what can happen is there can actually be a crisis where the soul doesn't want to actually give attention to the details. Like, oh, I got it, figure it out. General. Sagittarius Jupiter is generalized. I got the idea. So you can be a healer. Well, what kind of healer? With Jupiter, right? When you're working with Jupiter, you're working with nature, with natural practices, natural rhythms, intuitive healing. You're an apprentice, 6th house, to nature. You're an apprentice to developing your intuition. And so you can be, a shaman, and you have some herbs and medicines, and you're like, yeah, sure, here, just take this much. Go, you got a problem, and it creates an issue. This can create guilt by way of the Jupiter overdoing it function. I gave you too much. I actually wasn't paying attention to the details. I generalized it. And, the arrogance of Jupiter of, just kind of thinking you know what you're doing, but actually not being in the present moment. And this can lead to a crisis where things go wrong. And then you're brought back upon yourself and you realize, okay, I got to provide an abundance of attention, Jupiter, an abundance of humility. We learn with Jupiter in the 6th house to appreciate that we always have an opportunity to develop greater self-integrity, greater self-accuracy, greater attention to detail. And we do that by being honest about ourselves and our capacities, what we know and what we don't know. Through that honesty, we actually become available to receive so much learning. We receive instruction and guidance. Anything in the 6th house is where we are the apprentice. And then we become the master. And we become the master because we allowed ourselves to just be in the present moment, to learn and grow along the journey. And so there can be this really beautiful, optimistic attitude with Jupiter in the 6th house towards healing, towards learning, towards the journey. And it basically says, whatever I do, if I'm attending the present moment in a way of sincerity, I'm going to improve my skillfulness and my abilities. Now, we also have in the 6th house, hello dog, the idea of any kind of practice, technique, meditation, anything that allows us to cultivate ourselves with respect to our spirituality. 6th house relative to the 12th house, 12th house being God, 6th house, the techniques and practices we orient towards in our awakening. So here Jupiter would really be emphasizing, get out in nature. There's actually very often a very strong healing of Judeo-Christian constructs with Jupiter or Sag in the 6th house, because this can correspond to spiritual beliefs and cosmologies that really relate to the 6th house distorted idea of there being something wrong to fix. So it can be, I'm going to convince myself of these spiritual practices and these ways of doing these cosmologies that aren't really working, right? Maybe I feel organized because I got all my ducks in a row and I've sat for this many hours and I've done this specific technique. But the question has to be, is it providing a direct experience? Am I experiencing the fruits of whatever cosmology or practice I'm engaging with? And there can be a lot of guilt with Jupiter in the 6th house as well, relative to projecting belief systems that produce a sense of inferiority. This can easily be a person from a Judeo-Christian context that goes around, teaching, the Bible and the gospel and bringing it to people that are living a completely different life, but saying you need to follow this spiritual ideal to heal, to be pure. In the same way, Jupiter anywhere, Sag anywhere, can really speak to the psychology of alienation and people that come from more natural environment, indigenous tribes, cultures that are not necessarily of different cultures, different cosmologies. And so you can have Jupiter in the 6th house, very, very common actually. A soul that at some point, maybe in a past life or in this lifetime, they, because of their race or because of their culture, they were taken into a new environment, Jupiter, one that projected a story of inferiority upon them, and they're a slave. You know, it resonates a lot with people from a more indigenous cultures being taken from one land to another, and now you're treated as an inferior slave or servant. And then it's like restoring what's natural, restoring one's intuitive ways, one's natural healing abilities that come from the earth, that come from one's direct connection with the cosmos, their own indigenous way of being. That will be a big part of the healing with Jupiter in the 6th. Let me just take a note to see if there's anything else. Forget the note. Let me just tune in for a moment. That feels good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Your words on Jupiter and the conditioning of and Saturn of the Christian Judeo religion. Because that's the whole religion theme has been a very prominent theme in my own life, where I was born in the Mormon religion. And it wasn't so much that my parents conditioned me too much, but it was the environment, it was the community. And, you know, I have Sagittarius on the 6th. So, and then Jupiter in the 9th squaring all of that. And I would attract all of these comments like, you're not worthy. But yet I would see other people kind of doing the Saturn thing, kind of being false and just conforming with the things that you say and the things that you do and the judgments. And I just, you know, and I remember talking to the people who are supposed to be the very highest spiritually stationed people in the religion. And I would sit down with them and talk with them, and I realized they did not understand me. I realized that this is going to sound arrogant, but I knew more than what they were trying to teach me. And so I eventually took myself out of my religion. I formally got my name removed from the records, and I started letting God teach me, because I want to find God wherever I find it. That means if I go outside and I see a butterfly, or, you know, or I see some kind of person in ripped jeans who does a beautiful thing, God is everywhere. And I felt restricted by that in my religion. And so so you just really kind of stirred all of that up for me. Mm. And it was through the power of humility. It's through the power of analysis, of, you know, really looking at what the religion is telling you to do, and then just kind of thinking, well, that doesn't completely make sense, and coming up with your own thing and letting your intuition show you what natural spirituality is. So
yeah,
that was a great story, Stacie, because this whole everybody
frozen.
Yeah, you froze. Repeat
Oh,
that.
am I still here?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason we wanted to start this webinar series, Natural Astrology, was to remind people about the way these archetypes are expressed naturally, and for you finding God in nature, finding God in your own way, obviously coming through a very extreme religious experience, at least for the culture of that religion. And so Jeffrey used to teach that it takes an extreme to counteract an extreme. And sometimes we have to be shown, here's that Virgo expression, everything that we are not.
Yes.
Right? Nete. In order to remember who we are. And so hopefully we're helping you remember who you are a little bit every time we get together here, looking at the various archetypes. So thank you, Ari. I thought it was excellent. Just the way you described the Virgo archetype with Saturn as well. Oh my goodness, so many people suffer so much from the patriarchal perversion of what is really truly pure, and what we do to ourselves, how we beat ourselves up for things that are really not ours to bear. The burdens are not ours to bear. Remember too that Saturn in your chart, if you have it, Saturn in Virgo, or the sixth house, excuse me, that it will condition all the other archetypes. So, it's going to influence your relationships. It's going to influence how you feel through your emotional body on a moment-to-moment basis. And so remember that as well. And it is all about self-improvement, this archetype. There's a wonderful chapter in this book, if you don't have it, everybody, the Evolutionary Astrology book, the new one, on soul growth, sixth house, and issues of self-improvement is one of the chapters in there. So you'll benefit a great deal from that, and just in the discussion of Virgo as an archetype with the Mercury ruler. So, all right, well, thank you, Ari. We look forward to your song at the end of the show. And we're going to move on to our next guest, Rose Marcus from Vancouver, Canada. Welcome, Rose.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you. It's been wonderful so far. I am talking about the sun and moon in Virgo today. And I thought in starting with the sun, we are in Virgo month. And I was thinking about this time of year. This is the time of year when we are in the back to it process. And, summer is over for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're starting to shift our energies, and I think at this time of year, it always feels right to get to work. It always has this sense of, I've had this time and now I can get on with next. So I'm feeling ready to get down to doing some work, right? And so that kind of shift, in the Jewish culture, it is the Jewish New Year in September as well too. So it's got that kind of flavor to it. And I wanted to just suggest that if you have a strong Virgo signature in your chart, whatever it might be, if it is the sun in Virgo, if you have a packed sixth house like I do, if you have the moon in Virgo, if you have the south node in Virgo, strong qualities to the Virgo, then your soul is ready to get to work, right? You've already signed up for the program. And, we don't know when we start our journey here, all that we have prepared for ourselves. But if we even just start with that kind of thinking pattern that I have chosen to do this work, right? And I just think that somehow that maybe that helps a little bit with the Virgo masochism of always feeling that, I'm always suffering here. I'm always at a deficit here in some way. I have to say that when I was young, my family was very religious. Excuse my voice is going. I'm just going to put myself on pause for a sec here. Excuse me. When I was young, I sort of I say I grew up in the church, and this is an Orthodox religion, and it was a big cathedral, and we used to have these banquets all the time. So, the whole congregation would go downstairs and there'd be this banquet with all this food. And I was very, very young, and my favorite thing to do was serve. The women were in the kitchen making all the, plates of potatoes and the cabbage rolls and all of that. And I was just so happy and so proud to be able to take that food and put it on the table. And, there's something really healthy and wholesome and wonderful about service, right? About doing a good job, about doing the work and getting the result, right? And I was also thinking about this in terms of what time of year it is, the fall season. We're taking in the harvest and we're preparing for the fall season. There's a lot of work to be done. We agree that there's work to be done, and we get on with it. This is really, as we've discussed earlier in the talk as well too, it's a time of humanity as well too, right? You know, we are coming to the ending of an era. We're coming to the ending of a world age, the ending of the age of Pisces, and it's the Virgo sub-age. So this is a very, very dynamic time for us to be understanding that Virgo archetype. There's a doctor here, Dr. Gabor Mate, maybe some of you know him, and he always has this statement that he says, you know, we don't ask why the addiction, we ask why the pain. And I was thinking, you know, the quote here is, why the addiction to the suffering, and why the guilt and shame and inferiority, you know, and it is why that pain is because of the because we have not found our truth yet, you know, and the truth is that we are not separate from anything in the universe. We're not separate from consciousness, and we're not separate from our souls. You know, the sun, the glyph for the sun is a circle, and the circle represents wholeness, right? You know, and this is our search to get back to wholeness. The sun represents the hero's journey. We talked about the hero quest a little bit earlier here. In the hero's journey, the hero takes on a task. And this is something to be done for self, but also as a contribution to the collective on behalf of the whole. And in order to carry on that task, the hero must leave safety, security, familiarity. And to forge, you know, to leave all of that behind. The moon represents that safety, security, familiarity. And in the hero's journey, that task has to be big enough, large enough, so that there's no guarantee of success. It has to, you know, have a real element of putting oneself on the line. A real risk here, or it will not evoke the strength that is needed in order to conquer self. And in terms of the Virgo archetype is a hyper anxious archetype, hyper anxiety. Virgo looks to perfect the form. And it has that, when we have the distorted version of that, Virgo's a perfectionist, you know, never quite getting it right. All the things that Aries said a few moments ago, you know, never being able to have enough of what it takes to accomplish the task. But with the Virgo process, I always call it the soul's white glove test. You know, it is necessary to saturate the consciousness with experience. And in terms of saturating, you know, the hyper anxiety about Virgo is getting it right. And the only way that we can get it right is by exhausting all the possibilities, right? You know, so if we continue to go through this process and we continue to experience pain, punishment, and suffering, you know, there comes to a point in time where the soul will say, enough, I'm done here. I cannot do it any longer this way. And this is part of the Virgo process of verification. It is an elimination process. It is meant to eliminate everything that no longer serves. Virgo is an earth sign, and it's ruled by Mercury, a mind sign. And we have the mind-body connection. The mind-body connection correlates to our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health. It's how we perceive and how we make it real. In the Virgo process, the sixth sign of the zodiac, mutable sign, where we are shifting consciousness, we're moving, it's a transitional zone where we are meant to be starting the process of moving away from center of consciousness, being rooted in ego, and to realign it back to soul, right? At this point, Virgo, in relationship to Scorpio, the soul, that's a 60-degree angle. That's a creative opportunity angle to make that great shift. What the hero is looking for is the self-knowledge gained from the task. It is really to come to the truth, to the elimination process, to absolutely empty out and to arrive at that great existential void, that point of emptiness. Part of our conditioning patterns with the way we have been bombarded with our reality and with the conditioning factors that say that we are supposed to do it in any way, given in any way, shape, or form. You know, it is for us to arrive at that emptiness so that we can actually stop and pause. I always think of this as the Virgo archetype as emptying out the entire glass of water. And, you know, if you don't get all of that consciousness, you know, consciousness is intrinsic to the form it finds itself in, like the water in the glass. If you have not dumped out that entire glass and you try to fill it up again, if there's one drop in there, that can pollute the whole drink all over again. In terms of the Virgo process, Virgo serves in that way. But, you know, Mercury has two rulerships, Virgo and Gemini. And we do pull in that mutable cross of Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo. You know, Gemini is an information gatherer, but Gemini doesn't really have to go deep with the information in order to get the answer. You know, Virgo is going to be the great editor, is going to take, you know, a pen and wipe out and get the commas and the periods and so forth. You know, if we can, with that Virgo process, come to some understanding of what exactly that dynamic is, we don't have to do the entirety of, you know, rewriting the entire story. You know, it is about understanding it at an intrinsic level, understanding the truth of whatever it is. I always say that Virgo is like telling yourself a lie while you tell yourself the truth. You know, you always say, like, I can't do that. Inside of you, you know you can, right? Inside of you, you know you can. Or I should be doing that, when you know absolutely you shouldn't, right? You know, Virgo's job, you know, or Virgo serves in this way to get clear, you know, and the clarity that comes through Virgo is an elimination process, right? The moon is subconscious patterns that will affect one's health. And when you look at afflictions to the sun represents the core of vitality. It's the overall vitality of the system. So we look to the sun and the sun's condition in the chart for our physical health. We look to the moon as well too. You know, anxiety and fear, and you know, it's the subconscious. Has a direct correlation to our health, to our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health. So the moon is all about those subconscious patterns that will affect one's health. And the moon deals with the functioning of the system as a whole. Moods, feelings, these are going to dictate our health. So if we can look at those two planets, the sun and moon, the sixth house, any planets in Virgo and so on, you can understand the nature of the health of the system of the whole, and to look at whatever kinds of symptoms there are in the body are going to be clues to the subconscious patternings and the issues and the unfinished business that you have to correct and to heal and to shift consciousness. You know, the moon, when it's afflicted, the emotions, when it's afflicted, when Virgo's afflicted, it can chew on a hurtful experience for an eternity. You know, we keep falling back on these things. If you, we can't divorce the body from the emotions and from the spirit. You can't, as Pat was saying, it's spirit and matter together. So in looking at healing and health, we must look at the body as a whole.
Is it me? Thank you, Rose. Yeah, there was quite a bit there.
I forgot, I wanted to just read a couple of quotes. Okay. You know, an affirmation, I am not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm my soul. You know, come back to that. What was the other one here I had? Oh, sorry. I think therefore I am in terms of body health. Oh, I have to come back to that one here. Oh yeah. This is one I found today as well too. Know yourself. Don't accept your dog's admiration as conclusive evidence that you are wonderful.
Oh my goodness.
It was Ann Landers, by the way.
That's the best one of the... Oh.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so yeah, I'm just thinking about the moon here in Virgo, and
yeah. Oh, did I freeze?
No, we were just talking at the same time.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I can't hear.
Oh, that's okay. Go for it.
Faint.
Go for it.
Oh, I was just the moon in Virgo, and for all of us. Like, you know, some people might get migraines when they're emotionally stressed out. Some people might get low back pain or belly pain. And so all emotion will be stored in the body in one way or another when we're in stress. And there's this expression that all dis-ease is rooted in emotional unrest, really, for us all. And so, as you were saying, with the moon in Virgo or the moon in the 6th house, Rose, this is really even more true than ever, this particular expression. And so just the need to keep, as we improve upon our emotions, how we're feeling about ourselves, the thoughts that we're feeding ourselves, we can become our own healer in many ways. So of course the moon in Virgo has got to be one of the most self-critical places for the moon of all. There's such a natural humility that comes along with it too, never too big for their britches, for sure, and almost to a fault at times. But in looking at the natural expression of that moon in Virgo, I mean, Virgo as an archetype is one of my most favorite because of the complexity, the purity at its root, its essence, really. It is the most beautiful. I mean, that echinacea shown at the beginning is like my favorite flower. It's so vulnerable, so pure, it's so diverse. And so I think with the moon in Virgo, if anybody with this signature can really get to the purity of their essence, to strip it all down and to remember their own voice, natural voice versus the voices that they've taken in from others, that would be evolution for sure.
And you know, the natural Virgo process, it is going to be stressful, and it is going to be frictional, and there's so much that can get knotted up inside of you. But as you go through this whole process of suffering and the pain that you do and so on, do you know, if you ever kind of work through it, you get to this point where you have suffered and it's hurt and it's been painful and you can't figure it out, and there's no resolution, and there's no fixing it, and there's no saving it, and there's no rescuing, and there's no any of that. And you get to that point where you just have to give it up. And in that moment that you give it up, you know, there's the triseptal at 154 degrees, just, you know, you come to that point of just having to be okay with it. And once you get to that point where you stop wrestling with it, you start to accelerate the healing portion. You know, it's all that you can spend forever in the struggle end. But when you just shift that 1 inch, you're on the road to recovery, you're on the road to healing, you're on the road to, you know, to peace.
Yeah. Yeah. And with Virgo being a transitionary archetype, you know, I see Virgo as just a very present sign. It's very much in the present, because everything from Aries to Leo has been what has come before, and everything from Libra to Pisces is the unknown. And so there's just this, there's this place of not feeling comfortable. There's this sense of this void, you know, you're in a transition. And, you know, in the larger scope of things, it's that emotional bonding to the source of us all. How are you connecting with it? And what is your place in the world? I can't remember what else I was going to say about that. But
we said that in our radio show the other day, Kristin, as well too. You know, Virgo, I think Aries said this as well too. 1 step at a time. Put yourself in motion. Do something. It will lead to the next thing. You know, just one thing, one small step can make such a change.
I think, you know, the way that I said it is just starting it will feel like you're halfway there already.
Yeah.
Just the act of putting yourself in motion is such a healthy, it's like the movement of that chi energy that gets stuck or we get paralyzed. It unlocks it. It sets something in motion. And like, even if you're having a hard time with your thoughts and you just go out the door and take a walk, well, just the movement of walking is going to move the energy emotionally that you've been holding on to, just the breath, essentially. So just simple, healthy things like that, like the yoga experience I had. And every time I walked out of that class, so something as simple as that.
Simplicity is healing.
yeah.
All right, we're going to move to our last speaker. Thank you, Rose, so much. It was wonderful. We've got Bradley Naragon here, who's going to tackle the last few planets, Mars included. Welcome back, Bradley.
Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. Really enjoying this.
Yeah, me too.
So we're going to start with some Mars and Virgo. This is mostly Mars and Virgo with a little bit of Venus at the end. To understand Mars and Virgo through the lens of the natural zodiac, first consider that Mars, home sign of Aries, is in a gibbous inconjunct to Virgo. So if you have Mars in Virgo, or the 6th house, there's naturally exists a crisis in that placement, that archetypal combination. Mars is a lower octave of Pluto, of course, and represents our desire to evolve. In this case, someone with Mars in Virgo or the 6th house, the desire to evolve through the experience of crisis. And I thought, that seems kind of strange that one would actually desire to evolve through crisis. In the context of the natural archetypal expressions, this is indeed a natural potential of what someone may desire. So before we continue, I wanted to examine the definition of the word crises, because if you're like me, I carry a lot of conditioned meaning to my perceptions. So for example, with the word crisis, immediately it kind of seems to me as like, oh, this is something that's bad, or something I'd want to avoid. So the definition of crises, a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. Okay, that doesn't sound so great. A time when a difficult or important decision must be made. The turning point of a disease, when an important change takes place. And the Greek origin is decision, or from decide. So if we look at it from this point of view, someone with Mars in Virgo or the 6th house naturally desires for circumstances to come to a head. It's that critical turning point where through the analysis of our inner and outer circumstances, there's this important change and decision. At this point in the journey through the natural zodiac or houses, we're at the 6th archetype. And this is, as we've said, it's a process of self-refinement. Virgo being this last of the personal signs, this transitional sign. So when we have Mars and Virgo or the 6th house, the crisis is personal versus, say, social, right? Following the fullness of Leo, the Virgonian process reminds us that we have needs to refine and improve ourselves. And in regards to Mars and Virgo or the 6th, these crises are reflective of the soul's intention to truly understand its own desire nature, learning personal discrimination of what their desires lead to. A quick quote from Pluto Book 2, Jeffrey Wolfe Green. Mars in Virgo correlates to a soul that desires to create essential crises as a vehicle through which to actualize its core evolutionary and karmic intentions. In addition, the soul desires to humiliate and purify itself and to create experiences of disillusionment in order to understand the nature of its actual reality. And he goes on to explain that Mars in Virgo person has not been completely honest with themselves in recent lifetimes, nor the consequences of their desires and actions. So this natural phenomena of being dishonest with ourselves and others in the karmic past, I see it as it becomes inflated into grosser manifestations of masochism and sadism or anything on the spectrum, in part due to all the conditioning, the collective and the individual conditioning from this life and past lifetimes. And that over-exaggerates these perceptions that there's inherently something wrong with us. Virgo in general correlates with the search for ultimate meaning and truth and an inner spiritual fulfillment, a process that is fueled by this inner sense that we're missing something. So then we're seeking to find that, right? And so this is Virgo's evolution. And also this is through its polarity of Pisces. Everything evolves through polarity. So naturally one desires to fill that inner void. Of course, avoiding the void is a very common thing with this placement. And so we put all our energy, Mars, into, say, our work or helping others or sex, sexual addiction, into any habitual activity potentially that could distract us in our moments from the profound inner emptiness. So it really could be anything. And as Virgo naturally squares Sagittarius, part of the Virgo crisis correlates directly with one's own beliefs, as well as one's core honesty and dishonesty with oneself. So we have this, the gross distortions of the Mars in Virgo to either dominate and control or humiliate self or others stem from this combination of beliefs and ideologies that twist and distort natural laws in combination with this inner void and self-avoidance. So naturally, under these conditions, all this anger gets projected outward onto others or potentially onto oneself. In the case of sadism, I asked the question, is sadism natural? Clearly, sadism is a natural potential within the human experience. Is evil natural? If the world was created 50% good and 49% evil, as Yogananda taught, these darker paths have always been a natural temptation and potential. And due to human ignorance, in this case, self-dishonesty and denial and projection of anger, there is a natural impulse to humiliate others. And in the same sense, is masochism natural? Does deriving pleasure from one's own humiliation and pain naturally occur? Arguably, this is a natural response to the soul's karmic past, of course, and we know the conditioning of the individual and the collective consciousness, especially in this age of Pisces and this Virgo subage. They have fanned the flames of this natural impulse to purify and humiliate oneself. And now that's fire is raging into this full-blown masochism that is permeating the collective and individual psyches. As we close this Virgo subage, I kind of see that collectively we're seeking to purify the consciousness from this dis-ease of sadism and masochism that we've been suffering from. So when we turn our attention to sexuality, Mars in the sign of Virgo or the 6th house means that all these experiences are being played out sexually. So for example, someone who falls on the masochistic end of the spectrum, the sexual desire nature can often be sexually self-sacrificing. So Virgo in the 6th house as an archetype, of course, we know this correlates with the desire to help others and be of service. Now, if you were a sex worker, this could be a great placement because your whole job is to provide sexual pleasure for another. So that would work out. I know some people like that. In personal intimate relationships, then we have a fine line between this impulse to help the other receive states of sexual pleasure and self-denial of one's own sexual needs. And in the extremes of this expression, we see the desire to be punished, to experience pain and to be humiliated within the sexual experience. Is getting pissed on or shat on or chained up natural desires with Mars and Virgo? It's plausible that the opening up to a personal level, sorry, let me get that. Personal level so if we open up on a personal level to experience something like that, it could catalyze a needed crisis and a breakthrough, a new awareness of our own desire nature. However, repeated habitual seeking, humiliation, and pain sexually does seem rooted in some deeper psychological distortions of our ultimate personal truth. Of course, there's this natural line where we go beyond our own sense of safety, or we push someone else beyond their own sense of safety. I'd argue that softcore S&M, sure, is probably natural to a certain degree, and distortions of it manifest when we allow ourselves to be humiliated beyond our own true sense of self-love and security. And on the flip side, the sadist who gains sexual pleasure in the role of domination and control, I mean, are we talking about just being on top, just using handcuffs, or whipping someone until they're begging for it to stop? So the sadist Mars in Virgo gets off at this sexual circuit of energy, having someone tell you no and keep going. And again, if people want to play in this way, that's one thing. But when someone says no and it's taken as a yes, or the person doesn't care, and of course, that's very damaging. But we can see with this archetype that there could be multiple currents going. And so that's really interesting when you think about the psychology of sexuality in this case. And of course, this borderlines into stories of rape. And we've all been familiar with the story of the man says, she wanted it, and the woman said no. And if we understand this archetype fully, we would see that there is the possibility that the victim is running two different desires. One, to have self-love, respect, and feel safe in the sexual experience, and another desire to receive pain and be humiliated. And I would say that from the outside, the crisis of rape has interwoven the need for the victim to self-analyze, seeing the truth of their own dual desire nature. And in no way does this self-awareness make rape okay or right. It's a violation and severely damaging. And so I ask, when you encounter this in yourself, how do you experience something like rape, and also to be totally aware of the masochistic desire natures within, through a devastating crisis, reach a new place of total self-love, self-acceptance, and honest self-knowledge of one's own desires. And no does mean no. And I just wanted to quickly, I had to give so much to Mars that I don't have much for Venus, but Venus, of course, is our relationship to ourself. And you can imagine that one could easily be in an inner crisis with their relationship to themselves with Venus and Virgo. And something that we've talked about a lot in this time with Virgo is the damage that has been done through the collective conditioning and personal conditioning, the sense that we lack. And so with that Venus and Virgo, that sense of inner lacking or not being worthy or deserving, for me, I just always go back to, someone with Venus in Virgo or the 6th house and Ari Moshe kind of mentioned this too, like the 6th house Virgo being in this role of the apprentice. And so that's very true. And I'd also kind of throw it out there to say that if you have this position, maybe everything that you need is within inside yourself. And how hard is that, and like Patricia was saying, the Sophia is inside us, the spirit is inside us. Everything that we need is actually inside us. And so some Venus and Virgo mantras, of course, is that I am deserving, I am worthy, I am valuable, I am beautiful, and I accept myself exactly how I am. And there is beauty in the imperfection of creation.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. All right, since we're really running behind today, we've just all been saying a lot of great, wonderful things, but we're gonna try and wrap this up here, and we've got some images that Linda put together. I love all these slides today. Before we get to our musical close, here are some of our guests with their animals. There's Stacie with all of hers. Oh,
I got my Sambo, my Great Dane. He's the love of my life. And then, I mean, I don't consider them pets. I feel like they're like borrowed friends.
yes, I know, pets. I don't like that word.
Yeah. But I ran into a praying mantis or a tarantula. This tarantula in the picture, I found him when we were closing up a garden for the fall, and it was supposed to have a big snowstorm the next day. So I took him home and fostered him over the winter, and then released him back into the wild in the spring, and he did great. And then this is a Guira cuckoo that I helped raise when I was doing my zookeeping work, which was a really cool opportunity. So
awesome. Oh, this is my girl with our boy who no longer is with us. Lucky just passed a few months ago after 11 years, and he's just a part of our world and always will be. So he was a life changer for us all and a soul saver. Patricia and Flynn. So sweet. Rose and Biggie. Oh my God. Biggie, who's not very biggie.
He's cute. I'm wanting to hear about personalities.
Bradley and is that Lucy? There we go. Yeah, so cute. Yeah. Our animal family.
Mm-hmm.
To our volunteers and to Linda for everything you guys do.
Thank you, everyone.
We have Ari Moshe here for a wrap up for Virgo, and so give it to him.
Okay. So this song, the Hebrew chorus, comes from a teaching from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov a few hundred years ago or so. And his teaching was Imata ma'amin sheyecholim lekakel, ta'amin sheyecholim letakin, which is if you believe you can screw something up, you must believe that you can fix it. And then all the English lyrics are and the melody is my own. שיכולים לתקן. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. If you believe you can break it, you must believe you can fix it. If you believe you can break it, you must believe you can fix it. In this perfection, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this forgiveness, the truth, you are well, you are holy. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. If you believe in your sickness, you must believe in your wellness. If you believe in your sickness, you must believe in your wellness. In this perfection, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this forgiveness, the truth, you are well, you are holy. In this forgiveness, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this perfection, the truth, you are well, you are holy. Nay, na 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 nay, na nay, na na nay. Nay, na 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 nay, na nay, nay. Nay, na 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 nay, na nay, na na nay, nay. Nay, na nay, na na nay. Nay, na 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 nay. Nay, na 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 nay, na nay, nay. Nay, na 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 nay, na nay, na na nay, nay. Nay, na na nay, na na nay. If you believe in your lostness, you must believe you are found. If you believe in your lostness, you must believe in this moment. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן.
Thank you, Ari, Moshe. Beautiful. Love your music. Today was healing, and so is your music. Thank you. Music is an incredibly powerful healing method in our lives. So we all have go-tos when we're not feeling 100%. And that is one step toward healing right there. All right, so thank you all. We aren't going to have time for questions today. We're all a little bit longer winded, but there was so much to say about Virgo. And I remember in the EA school back in the day, Jeffrey used to spend an enormous amount of time on Virgo, way more than any other sign. And so there's so much wisdom in that archetype. I encourage you to explore more deeply. So thank you to all of our guests today, our panel, and thank you to the volunteers and to Linda for your extraordinary support for this webinar, and I loved all those slides today. We look forward to talking about Libra, 7th house, and Venus coming up Saturday, September 12th. Thank you, Stacie, as well, my
Thank
compadre.
you. Yes, thank you. Love this.
And here's our lineup, our wonderful volunteers. Thank you all. Bless you all
Thank
for.
you so much. Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful.
Okay, and if you want to join us on the message board or interested in learning more about EA, if you're a newcomer, here's the website. And until next time, namaste.
Namaste.